Okay, it is 5 o'clock, Tuesday, November 27th, 2018. I'm going to call the order the Rockingham Select Board Special Meeting. Are there any additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters or pressing matters that will require ratification?
I have none.
Okay. Any public comment on items not on the agenda? All right, moving on. All right, we are here for the VTrans presentation, the scoping project report for the Depot Street Bridge. I'm going to move it out of I'm going to take Doreen's seat, actually.
Oh, can you see it from there?
Yeah.
Walking in.
Try not to trip over the corner.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
So before we
Welcome.
start, this is going to be an interactive presentation. Everybody should have voting clickers. If you want one and don't have one,
You could, unless you want to. Do you want to sit there?
We also do have a sign-in sheet as well that's circulating.
This is the report. If you want to see it too.
So this is the alternatives presentation meeting for the Depot Street Bridge 53 bridge over the Power Dam Canal. I'm Laura Stone, the VTrans scoping engineer. This is Todd Sumner, the VTrans project manager. So the purpose of the meeting today is to provide an understanding to our approach to the project. We're going to provide an overview of the project constraints and the scoping process. We're going to discuss the alternatives that we considered for the bridge and for maintenance of traffic. We're going to discuss our recommended alternative and provide an opportunity to ask questions and voice concerns. Really, that last part, the ask questions, you can interrupt me at any time. We would like to keep this sort of a conversation and interactive. So, here is a location map. The bridge, oops, sorry about that. Bridge is located at that green star right there. It's located at the intersection of Depot Street and Canal Street. South of Depot Street, on Canal Street, this is one way moving from the bottom to the top of the page. And then north of Depot Street, that is a two-way section. So Bridge 53 is one of two bridges that access the island from the Vermont side. Bridge 52 on Bridge Street is the only other access to the island and is also considered structurally deficient. It does have a rating of 5 fair. The island is zoned for high-density commercial industrial development, so there's a lot of truck traffic, and the truck traffic is expected to increase in the future. We have the Bellows Falls Waypoint Center. Right here we have the Amtrak station. Up here, so we do have some pedestrian generators there. So meeting overview, we're going to talk briefly about the VTrans project development process. Again, project overview, we're going to talk about the existing conditions, the alternatives that we considered, and discuss the recommended alternative. Maintenance of traffic, we're going to talk about the overall project schedule and when you can expect to see this in construction. Summary, next steps, and again, questions. So here's a graph of our VTrans project development process. The project has been funded, and we're really in this early stage of development. Project is not defined yet. This is where we identify the resources, historic resources, archaeological resources, environmental resources. We evaluate the alternatives. We have this public participation piece where we're at now, building consensus, and really after this, and once the town makes a decision where they want to go, that's when the project will be defined, and we'll move into the project design. We'll quantify the areas of impacts, we'll do the environmental permitting, the historic permitting, develop those plans, estimates and specifications, and that's when the right-of-way process would start. At the end of that design process, we're at contract award, which is when you will see construction. So here's our first clicker question. Who are you representing? Have municipal official, resident, local business. D is school. E is emergency services. F, independent organization, G, press, or H, other.
Wait, more than one time?
You should
We
probably
gotta
use
take
one
one of those
clicker.
away from you, I think.
So I believe,
Yeah, get it away from him.
I believe this is the only question where you're allowed to pick more than one.
Oh, good.
You can?
So, yes.
Oh, you can.
With the same clicker?
With the same clicker, you should be able to. Okay. And how often do you use this segment of Depot Street? Daily, weekly, monthly, rarely, or never? Okay. How often do you walk over the bridge? It's good to see we have some daily walkers. And how often do you bike over the bridge?
Bicycle?
Bicycle. Yeah. And Everett, do you know if that study you gave me earlier included bicycles as well? Or just pedestrians? Okay. And what's your reason for attending this meeting? A specific concern, general interest?
Does.
It does. Oh, that's great. Living close vicinity or other? So now on to the existing conditions. This is a picture looking east over the bridge. The roadway is classified as a local road, class 3 town highway. The existing typical section here is a 11-foot travel lane with 5-foot shoulders. For a local road here, it does call for 9'2", so 9-foot travel lanes and 2-foot shoulders, but we'd be proposing keeping that existing wider typical section. The bridge is an 112-foot long concrete arch owned by the town of Rockingham, so there are going to be local funds involved here, and constructed in 1909, so 109 years old. So the culvert's rated as 4, poor. It's structurally deficient. There's significant spalling and exposed rebar. There's heavy spalling and deterioration along the water line. And you can see the significant amount of spalling and exposed rebar here in the arch ring. Here's looking west over the bridge. We do have a historic house right there. The bridge itself is historic, and the canal is also historic. We have hazardous waste contaminated soils. Utilities, there's water and sewer that run underneath the road above the bridge. And there's also aerial utilities. And we have a railroad crossing. So here's a map of the hazardous waste sites. This property right here has hazardous waste contaminated soils potentially. This could be significant to the town because if there does have to be any remediation of those hazardous soils, that cost is totally 100% a town incurred cost. So here's the existing conditions layout. We have the red lines here are the existing property lines. Purple lines, I know the colors are kind of hard to see, are property lines. The green areas are sidewalks and walking paths. There's an at-grade railroad crossing 300 feet east of the bridge. Well, that does have a safety rating of, I believe, 87, which is above our threshold of 60 that we would need to address a safety concern there. It is likely that we'll have to repave the surface. There's utilities running under the bridge here. That's the sewer line. the water line, and they do run up and down Canal Street as well. So design criteria and considerations for Depot Street. There's an average daily traffic of 530 vehicles per day, a design hourly volume of 100 cars per hour, percent trucks of 11%, a design speed of 25 miles per hour. Again, we have those utilities, we have historic resources, potential hazardous waste, and a railroad crossing. So the alternatives we considered, first is that no action alternative. We wouldn't recommend that just because of the existing condition of the bridge. We did look at a permanent bridge closure because there are several bridges going onto the island. That's something that we look at as disinvestment. The arch would be closed to traffic and it could be rehabilitated for pedestrian use only. That would leave just Bridge 52 or that street bridge in place. Once a bridge is disinvested and removed for vehicular traffic, it would not be eligible for future town highway funding. Next, we looked at the arch rehabilitation. The arch would need extensive work to the foundation of the arch, so you're going to have to put in cofferdams, which can be costly. It's going to be an expensive project that would only have a 20-year design life. I think, as you know, with the rehabilitation of the Bridge Street Bridge, you pumped in a lot of money, or I'm not sure how that was funded, but and now there's only a 10-year design life to it, and so I don't think we'd recommend the arch rehabilitation either. We looked at a full bridge replacement on alignment with a new arch. The arch would be similar to the existing bridge. We'd have to match the concrete color. Would probably have to match the existing span, the lines of the walls, any decorative features of it for historic permitting issues. Again, the current typical section would be maintained, so you have that, or it's 11'4" with a sidewalk. We also looked at an off-alignment option, 450 feet northwest of the existing bridge. So for this option, the remaining two-way segment up to the bridge would be converted to one-way. It would be a longer span bridge, so we'd be looking at an 170-foot span bridge with a skew. So it would be a more costly option than the on-alignment option. It would avoid those utility relocations, and it would avoid hazardous soils. Another option we looked at was a new bridge at the Bridge Street location. This would leave the more historically significant arch in place for pedestrian use only.
Can you go back to that for 1 second?
Yes.
Are we gonna revisit these at some point?
We're going to be looking at a cost matrix, so we're going to be comparing the costs of all of the different options.
What's this alternative called?
I believe this is alternative 4 in the scoping report. It's the off-alignment option.
You say utility relocation is avoided. Is that assuming the Depot Street Bridge remains?
Yes.
So if you don't keep that bridge, you decide to remove it, you would still have to add utility relocation somewhere.
Yes, so the issue here is that the Depot Street Bridge is extremely historic. It is the longest arch of its type and the oldest of that type constructed of that period. So usually when we do an off-alignment option like this, we construct a bridge off-alignment and then we remove the existing bridge entirely. But because this is so historic, we're not going to be allowed to remove that bridge.
So if that bridge stayed due to the realignment construction, would that bridge be eligible for any kind of future funding from the state?
If it was closed to vehicular traffic, no.
Which would, if you're
This would
building another
be-
bridge,
this would
then
be
you would
the new
probably
bridge.
close it down.
Yeah.
The other thing that's not noted in here is there's a sewer main that runs down through Island Park and then crosses Depot Street and runs southerly through the Waypoint Center.
Okay,
Just so you know that there is another sewer line in that vicinity.
okay,
Enforcement.
okay.
It's not mentioned.
You'll find it.
Hopefully not the
Somebody.
hard way.
So we did look at replacing the Bridge Street Bridge instead and rehabbing Bridge 53 for pedestrian use only. It would avoid railroad flagging. Again, the hazardous waste impacts would be avoided. Better turning movements for trucks and buses. It has a higher traffic volume. I believe it's about 2,600 vehicles per day versus the 530.
Excuse me?
Yep.
As far as traffic goes, I think those numbers are not necessarily completely accurate because certain traffic can currently not go over Depot Street. So as far as that goes, I mean,
Yep.
the numbers would look different if the rating.
Wasn't it 13,000 when the Vilas Bridge was open? That number?
Vehicles going across,
Yeah,
it could,
That
daily.
would be a good number.
Would you have that data of what the volumes were when the Vilas Bridge was open?
That number,
It's possible. There's counts done periodically every now and then. We have counts dating back to the 70s
Okay.
for certain areas, and so if a count was done here, it's in the system somewhere.
There was a traffic study that was done several years ago that has that count on it. I've got a copy of it at the house. I didn't bring it tonight, but
Okay.
I do have a copy of it because I was going over, and I think it was to do with the trustees redoing their traffic ordinance. I think it was handed out maybe a couple months ago at our, right after you got hired, I think it was handed out, or maybe
Okay.
before. So
Okay.
it's just got to be a copy around here somewhere.
So on to our recommended alternative. We recommended a full bridge replacement on alignment with a new reinforced concrete arch. It would be a closed spandrel elliptical arch with similar dimensions to the existing bridge. That 11.4 typical section with a sidewalk would be maintained, and this would have a 75-year design life. Aerial utilities, gravity sewer, and water mains would be expected to be relocated. Because this is a town-owned structure and those utilities are within the town right-of-way, those would all be participating costs.
So you would fund it, or?
We would fund it, yep. Yep, the town would have either their 5% share or their 10% share. It is estimated to cost about $500,000 to relocate those utilities, so it's a significant cost. So this would be the recommended typical section. Railing, railing would probably not be this railing here. It would be a historic looking railing that the design project manager will work with the town to determine what type of railing meets the historic district. We have those utilities here. Those might be moved, maybe encased underneath the sidewalk would be a good place to put them. You see that 4-foot shoulder, 11-foot travel lanes, 4-foot shoulder. So here's the on alignment layout. There's the bridge, the sidewalk would be kept on the same side of the bridge. New arch, matching existing for historic preservation. Again, that 11.4 typical section is going to look very similar to what's out there right now. Again, we have those hazardous soils on this side right here. And we have the aerial utilities and the water and sewer mains. Yep.
So before you go off this page here, the report talks about eliminating that curve around station 150, looks like. And I think if this alignment is picked, eliminating that curve, it doesn't look like much of a curve there.
Yeah, so
But that would actually take your, where the Floyd LaFola is, actually would take the intersection closer to maybe the edge of the greenhouse or maybe up a little further.
Yeah, so the curve starts about here and somewhere back here, so there's a slight curve here. And I think that makes sense to straighten that out.
Close to
What I've
90.
also shown here is a flare, which I believe that's a 30-foot radius, which meets the town standards. So we would try to, I think existing goes to about here. And so we try to improve that turning radius as much as
So,
possible.
right, if we can get it, I mean, 90 degrees would be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but if we,
Again,
Well,
historic permitting might play a role.
yeah.
Let me ask you mentioning 90 degrees would be perfect, but just within, what, a year, we've had a semi almost catch the fence there, and buses is sometimes very difficult to navigate that turn. So, I mean, I think really need to think of the future. And I think looking off alignment, to at least angle it, or I'd be looking up, running a bridge along the new bridge up alongside the railroad bridge that you talked about. I mean, you're talking an industrial, heavily industrial use in the future. Our development director has stated at one point here, at the least having 2 accesses of bridges that could handle truck traffic. When you get into these weight ratings, we got a semi that's, loaded 80,000 pounds, 53-foot trailer. I mean, that's gonna be a little difficult to navigate, I would think.
A question, could you clarify, I don't understand that radius, because I mean, to me, is that radius more gentle than the radius that's there now?
Yes, it's a wider
Okay,
radius.
in Everett, are you talking about an even wider radius?
No, 30-foot radius would help along with eliminating that curve so that as close to 90 as possible. Right now, you probably have an 85-degree turn there.
There's a slight curve here, so what Everett's talking about is taking, a point here and and straight lining this to
Okay.
make a 90-degree
All
with
right,
Canal
okay, I
Street
got it.
here.
Yeah,
Had that been the case with this truck that was stuck, it was closer to 90, and plus we had the Jersey barriers there
Yeah.
too, plus a shorter taper.
could you?
He would have actually made that corner.
Could you go over more than the 30 for the radius to accommodate the trucks and stuff?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, yeah.
There, I mean, would that be feasible?
I think getting anything larger than a 30 here is gonna be tight, just based on the constraints. You have the canal here.
And to be honest, once you get that to 30 and you get that barrier out of there and you've got the shoulder to work with too, they should have,
Yeah.
we haven't run any turning radiuses, that's a design thing, we haven't got to the design
Yeah.
phase yet. But I would imagine that would be good enough to handle most of the
Yeah.
truck traffic that's going
I think
through there.
what we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to look out down the road, 30 or 40, 50 years down the road, assuming the Vilas Bridge may open up at some point in time. There'll be increased traffic, and there's gonna be 2-way traffic on Depot Street going in and off that bridge. It'd be nice if you had large vehicles, i.e. trucks, et cetera, that they weren't always going into the opposite lane like they do now, and I observe down there, into the oncoming traffic lane.
Right, the
So-
goal would be to make
Yeah,
make tweaks. I'm not sure we can get it as big a radius as you'd like.
Right.
But the goal would be at the design phase to try
Yeah.
and tweak that to get the biggest truck we can get through there.
and what type of weight ratings are you talking?
That would be unlimited,
Unlimited?
with a new structure.
HL
Right.
93.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is a design envelope that captures all legal state loads.
right.
Overload permits might be a different story, but to be honest, it
Right.
shouldn't be a problem either.
Now, when the Violet Street Bridge was open, because it's more aligned with the Bridge Street Bridge, and this is like a tangent, did most of the traffic using that Violet Street Bridge take the Bridge Street?
Probably, I was
Yeah.
younger than.
Yeah,
Right. And to be honest, you mentioned it earlier, you want a new bridge here, because you're gonna be rehabbing Bridge Street down the road a ways, and you still wanna have a good bridge to maintain traffic on when that one's getting replaced. Just thinking in the long term.
yeah,
And we'd like
So
to-
you brought that up, and that's a good point.
yeah.
There's a question behind you, Jim.
In your cost estimate, you mentioned some contaminated soil. Did you include any estimates for
I did not.
remediating that? Because presumably that would have to be done.
That's a pin that comes up from a hazardous map that A&R provides. We don't know the extent of that. So in the design phase, when I get hold of the design phase, I would take a couple of borings, one right near the end of the bridge, one a little bit farther away, and find out where that contamination is, just to figure out if it's there, or if it is there, what, does it vary as you get closer to the bridge? And secondly, if there is, we probably sheet pile the end of that as much as we can, so we're limiting the amount, to get down into the abutments and stuff, to limit the amount of hazardous material we actually have to handle and remediate. But those are design issues that, probably more than what you guys want to know now.
Thank you.
You had a question, I noticed you've been.
Yeah, back to the turning thing. I mean, I'm sure the new arch bridge is on a 90 thing, right? I don't know what the radius
sure
is.
that is.
And 53-foot trucks have to go into the other lane. It's a much busier intersection. I don't think you could make a 90-degree turn with a 53-foot trailer where you can stay in your lane, especially in this tight spot.
How much wider is this new bridge compared to what we have down here now?
It will be maintaining the existing typical section, so, you do have those concrete barriers up right now where they put up the W-beam rail.
Yeah, but for the
And
rail to rail right now.
The rail to rail is
36.9,
gonna be
I think.
maintained. It's gonna
It's
just
not
match
gonna get any
existing.
bigger?
It's not gonna get any bigger. So according to the standards, we have Vermont state standards is how we determine roadway widths. And it's based on the average daily traffic, the design speed,
Right.
and going into these tables for a local road, that gives you 9-foot travel lanes with 2-foot shoulders. So the 11.4 that you have now greatly exceeds that 9.2 standard.
And then two other things is, historic preservation is gonna really limit how much we can actually change that existing, anyways, from a historic point of view. Secondly, it is gonna feel a little bit wider once you get that barrier out of there.
No, it just, to me, it doesn't seem like it's, what would be 30 feet wide right now?
I think it said
34 feet wide right now?
I thought it was 33.
36.9
Is that what it
is
said?
what,
11.4 for.
with your 4-foot bike path and
It's on the
4-foot.
front page of that, I think.
15 and 15.
There somewhere down
And then
here.
the curb mounted railing.
Yeah, it's,
There you
The
go.
existing one's 32.
38.1.
11.
The outside, that's not, but it's, okay, 35.7 to,
right. Curbs and railing, you're
Just
looking at
doesn't seem
30
that-
feet.
doesn't seem that wide right now. Okay.
Just, okay, just a question about the right-of-way and the relationship with the owner of the canal. How does that all work, and are you constrained with the existing right-of-way? I guess it looked like it was, your plans were right at the edge of the right-of-way.
Yeah, so any alternative that you look at here, because the existing wing wall is basically on that right of way, I
Okay.
believe on both sides, that we're gonna be obtaining rights, and so there's a process for that. Todd probably knows the right of way process a little better than I do.
Oh, you don't already have it?
No, we wouldn't get
Oh.
that until we get, the goal here is to get to the project defined. Once we get the project defined,
Right.
we got direction for where we're moving forward, then it's gonna fall on to me for the design process. And that's when we start our permitting and right-of-way processes, once we get a set of plans to work off and to start.
Okay, I thought you might have had a pre-existing right-of-way.
There is
just
a existing
historical.
right-of-way, that's represented by the red line that's up there. That's what the town
Oh,
highway
okay.
that's there. That's your
Okay.
town highway right-of-way.
That's the town's.
Yes.
Okay.
So what she's pointing is those wing walls are so close to that right of way.
Right.
In order to remove them and put new ones in there, we're gonna need easements from
Right.
whoever owns that canal to get in there to do that work regardless.
Right, okay. Okay. And then just a comment about the alternatives. Our staff met, our development staff met and talked about long-term possibilities of development on the island. And in some respects, the off-site alignment could work better. I mean, this is a 100-year project again, right? Could work better over the long term in terms of trucks getting off of the island, in terms of preserving the character of this area, because it is a nice walkable area right now. So I was hoping that the town might not have to make a decision immediately, but be able to narrow it to two, because recommended alternative is certainly better than the alternative that we were at before, which we would have ended up with just one vehicle bridge.
I don't think that's in your best interest.
No, not at all. No, and actually, thanks to VTrans, I should say that, because you guys changed your recommendation after we spoke with you, and we appreciate that flexibility. So the replacement in a historic manner makes sense if it's going to have to be replaced, certainly. But I think it would be helpful for the town if we had more time to study the long-term impact of the off alignment, just because it could make a big difference to the character of the town and of the island.
Yeah, so you can certainly, you can give us your answer months from now. There's no.
We're just not gonna progress on something
Yeah, so-
until we get something.
And we don't want to slow you down, so let us know when those deadlines are. I mean, maybe it's next week for this, is that?
No, it's all on you guys. If a lot of towns will meet at their next select board meeting after this meeting, and so
Okay.
that's usually a month away, and then we'll hear back from them. Some towns tell us that night what they want. Some towns have taken 6 months to get back to us.
Okay.
To say this is how we want to move forward, but we're not going to start developing conceptual plans until we get a direction.
Okay, that would be great.
Just one other question. On this design here where you expanded the right turn here,
Mhm.
I'm thinking of a tractor trailer truck, or more specifically an oil tanker that obviously quote unquote is currently there's an important business there on the island. Are you saying that makes that turn easy without blocking the lane, or? I'm trying to picture.
It's going to make it easier than it is now.
Right.
It's an improvement.
Again,
I don't
if you're
even
talking
think
about a
they-
53-foot trailer, I'm not sure, I don't think anything we do here is going to improve that one to that extent.
I think-
Without going into
Yeah.
another lane.
Whether it
But
be
we
a-
haven't run any turning radiuses to find out what's the biggest truck we can get through there without encroaching into the other lane.
Yeah, because I think that.
We don't know that.
And
I
that's
think
something that we
practically
can
speaking, from a longer term viewpoint, and certainly from a short term standpoint, with code and
Well-
the ability of the businesses to use that bridge is rather critical to the decision.
Yeah.
So it's,
What I'm looking at is kind of two parts, Jigs, is if the Vilas Bridge does open again, we recently had discussion about truck traffic through the square. If you went, in my opinion, with the alternative, which was just north of there, you may be able to route a lot of that traffic, or the large trucks
I
through
agree
there.
with you. I was just at.
No, I'm not saying
I prefer
that.
that
Yeah.
alternative too, but I was curious as to see what
Sure.
this would give
Sure.
us type of thing.
It-
I plead my ignorance here. What type of bridge is the Villas Bridge?
It's stone, right?
Concrete arch.
It's
It's a concrete arch, okay, all right,
Double.
okay.
Yeah, you need to take a look at
Yeah,
it.
it's
It's
like-
No,
beautiful.
I mean,
It's
that's.
over
Fine.
a
10 years
I just
plan.
wanted
Double
to make,
connect.
I knew it was a historic bridge, I just was making
Yeah.
sure it wasn't like a covered bridge or something like that.
Oh, no.
Because if it's a covered bridge, you're not getting trucks through there ever.
No, no.
That's why I was
Yeah.
asking.
It's like
We don't need
stone
trucks.
arches, yeah.
The other thing I favored
your
that
guy.
is when you talk about the new site north of there, the alternative is we're not dealing with potential of the hazmat or the utilities to an extent that we are here. And also, we're not disturbing the character of this Depot Street neighborhood, et cetera. I think looking down to the road to the future, regardless if that Vilas Bridge is open or not, if you have a nice, clean, straight road, and I think of, I get up there in Montpelier and I get on the back street from the Capitol there, and it's kind of cluttered with some of them bridges. The same thing, what's got some nice layout is when you get into Barry, you come off the pike there, and they've got it's a beautiful entranceway. But I understand this is historically significant,
Right.
but, reality, I think, in my opinion, down the road would be if you're having any kind of traffic, especially the truck traffic, you want to avoid going through the square primarily. A nice clean straight shot up to the top of the hill there with an eyesight of the arch bridge is the way I would think you'd logically want to go. Yeah.
So the only other thing I'll mention about the off alignment option is that the local share for that off alignment option would be 10%. It wouldn't be eligible for the 50% reduction.
Mm-hmm.
There's Act 153 from the 2012 legislative season says that if a town closes a road and doesn't construct a temporary bridge during construction, they get a 50% reduction in their local share, so their share would go down to 5% from the 10%. And so that wouldn't be eligible for the off alignment option,
Right.
which could make it
Right.
And that's
that
how you
bridge-
presented it to
Right,
us.
and that bridge would be
Yeah.
much more expensive because it's a much longer bridge than this one, and your right of way that you're gonna need to obtain for this bridge is gonna be more expensive because we're only gonna need a little bit for this one,
Mhm.
the off alignment. There's gonna be greater permitting impacts possibly as well from an environmental point of view, but maybe it's a non-factor because it's a canal. Again, I'm just throwing those out
Oh,
there,
yeah.
but until I get into that process, I don't know for sure. But those are potential.
Now, do you have those cost comparisons here on your presentation so the people who don't have this will be able to see it?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, he's
Can we,
Well, yeah.
we only have like 20 minutes left because this meeting has to start at 6, the next one. So
Okay.
if it's possible to hold questions so they can go through, get to the next slides, and then you can come back to those questions. You can keep it, unless it's just to that design, that slide we were just.
I can wait.
Okay.
So I'll try to keep this quick. Proposed profile would be matching existing. Maintenance of traffic that we considered, we looked at an off-site detour, existing bridge for off-alignment option, or a temporary bridge. For the road closure option, we'd be looking at an entire construction season, that's about 18 weeks there. The vehicular detour would be Island Street to Bridge Street to Square to Rockingham to Canal Street because of that one-way section here. Pedestrian route would also, it'd be recommended to be signed based on the pedestrian volumes, and so they could use that one-way section of Canal Street. It's less than a mile end to end, so it's sort of an obvious detour. So here's another clicker question to gauge how people are thinking, how people are feeling about a closure here. What is the maximum acceptable length of closure for Bridge 53? So that's good to see. So a temporary bridge, we'd be looking at a one-way temporary bridge based on the traffic volumes. The utilities could be moved to the temporary during construction. Sometimes there's a benefit there, and it would require additional right-of-way. Here's one alignment that we looked at for a temporary bridge. So the recommended scope here from VTrans perspective is a full bridge replacement with a reinforced concrete arch on alignment with traffic maintained on an off-site detour, which would give the town that 50% reduction in share. Again, it would be an arch similar to the existing. We'd be looking at a 120-day road closure. A separate pedestrian route would be signed. The typical section, again, would be maintained, and it does exceed the Vermont state standards. Be looking at a 75-year design life, and that would be an HL 93 load-rated bridge. Right-of-way would be needed. Extensive utility relocation needed. The water, sewer, and aerial utilities would need to be relocated. Potential impacts to contaminated soils, again, we don't really know the extent of those until we go in. And again, the pavement should be extended past the railroad crossing. Railroad flaggers would be expected throughout the construction duration, just because of the proximity to the railroad crossing. And so here's the cost matrix. So here's our recommended alternative, the new arch on alignment. And then here is the new steel beam bridge off alignment, that alternative 4. So in terms of project cost, total project cost, this includes utilities, right-of-way, engineering. They're pretty comparable, 3.4 million versus 3.5 million. But where the town share comes in, you'd be looking at about 172,000 versus 350 because of that reduction in local share.
Just one quick question. In the off alignment, when vehicles get off the new bridge into the now parking lot, is that all figured into the traffic flow? Is that part of our cost? That's not incorporated into this cost. I'm a little confused where the vehicles will turn to cross the railroad tracks on the new off alignment option.
So if I could go back.
I'm sure the cost stops where the bridge ends. so then-
Somewhere you're gonna have a
No, the
90
cost-
degree something that someone can't.
Well, it would
So
be-
the cost is included, so, oops, there
There
we
you
go.
go.
So the
So it-
road goes all the way almost up to the canal, so
There's
there's
a
not a
90
lot of
degree.
approach work there. And the parking lot is here, so that's already a paved surface. So we would pave the approaches of the bridge. There would be minimal approach work there. That would take up that parking lot though. This
The-
side of the parking lot would be
That parking is up by
eliminated.
that river.
That cost is essentially to the end of your red line, you're saying?
Yep.
Okay?
Yep, there would be minimal work here. New line striping.
That was my only question.
So the future, I don't know if you cost estimated, but if the town were to take this option here, off through the line, what would today's cost be to dismantle that bridge, I guess, Bridge 53? Because that day will be coming. It's just a matter of when.
I think what you're gonna do is utilities.
We couldn't dismantle.
No, it's all, that day is coming, so I'm just, I know it's something, it's an evaluation, it's a criteria.
So I'm
Some number
not
we gotta
sure.
do.
Go back to the cost sheet when we talked about this,
Yeah,
because there was the $100,000, there's some cost to do a repair to the bridge that would work to maintain the structure for a pedestrian or local traffic.
yeah, so there.
Wasn't that 15 years worth?
20 years.
This says 20 years, but would it actually last 20 years? I don't know. Going into the Bridge Street rehabilitation, you were probably expecting 20 years, and that didn't happen. It's hard to know the extent of the deterioration of that existing arch. Removing that bridge entirely, I'm not sure what the historic permitting, if it doesn't use federal funding. I know there's a lot of stipulations when federal funding is involved.
So I guess that's, if we talk about, what Wendy's talking about, we'll have to have that full cost down the road is when they pick us all off route line. Someday that cost will face the town.
Well, it's
Yeah,
gonna,
right.
it's gonna face it.
No, on the town's dollars.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%, versus-
Yeah, so that arch needs to be addressed at some
Right.
point.
Yeah, there's a
Before it
question in the back.
falls down.
The day that we all met down there,
Yes.
in the spring, was talk about doing the off-alignment bridge and then making the arch just pedestrian or bike traffic. And you gave the years of service, years of life left in that bridge went up significantly once we close it to big traffic, right?
It does. So I talked to our programming section after that meeting, and the rehabilitation of that existing bridge would not be eligible for federal funding as part of this project.
So
And
pedestrian use with an offline along the bridge. Correct.
Yes, so the town, if the town decided to move forward with that off-alignment option, we would not be touching the arch, and so that would be entirely on the town's funds.
And then with that, the off-alignment, when you go back to the picture, doesn't it defeat the purpose of the parking lot, putting another T intersection back in there?
Yeah, you'll have another 90 degree intersection regardless.
why couldn't we
Right here, yeah.
reconfigure that
For
parking lot?
truck traffic.
Why couldn't we reconfigure the parking lot to make that more of a straight shot right from the railroad crossing?
Yeah, that's an option.
I'm not
There's
sure if
gonna
the
be
owner
some
was
more
right.
work here.
You can't have traffic
Close the
backing up there at a
entire-
railroad
Close
crossing.
everything to regular traffic, it won't matter. You might give you more room in the end.
It would go right to the railroad crossing, you're right about that. And the railroad's right-of-way probably goes to about here. And I'm guessing you couldn't put the bridge or the bridge approach within that railroad right-of-way.
Yeah, and the we're not sure if the railroad might own that first part of that parking lot. Or the whole thing.
Whole thing.
They own, railroad owns the whole
State
thing.
owns-
The state of
the
Vermont
state
owns
owns
it,
it.
it's leased to the town.
Okay.
Right, but if it's railroad property, the railroad company that's using it has a lot more authority to say yes or no.
Yeah, I don't think the railroad is leasing the parking lot,
Okay.
so.
So just when considering the cost in that cost matrix, there's acres on the island that have nothing going on, absolutely nothing, on Island Street in the center of the district that are pegged for redevelopment over a 5-year time frame. And a TIF district with the bridge as a nexus for that development, which it is, would easily cover the difference in cost with 50% and 10%, and probably allow for to work with bike pedestrian grants to do that rehab of the Depot Street Bridge to maintain that. So just for our consideration, the numbers do work as favorably when all of those, when the development factors are taken into account. And the traffic counts are with no business there. And in Windham County, I think the island redevelopment is pegged as one of the top 3 development priorities for the Windham County program. And why put restrictions on there? The development there has dwindled over time, and why maintain a restriction that we don't need to have when there's a viable option to eliminate that constraint?
Yeah, so
There's a,
I just want to comment that one of the things that prior wasn't included in the community input was the impact of closure, the construction on the Rockingham Canal House. Because some of the residents, as a senior housing or handicap, some of their parking units, their units park over on the island. And to have some kind of a pedestrian access to get to their parking seems kind of important when you're dealing with seniors. They can't walk all the way around the route that you've got scoped out. It's just something to think about, whether that could happen. The other thing is when we talk about rehabbing the current bridge is, there's some photos, I know nothing was done below the water line, but there were some photos that were taken when the hydro dam was being worked on and the water level went down. Everett Hammond took some photos, I took some photos, they were left in the computers, and they showed, I remember seeing the damage, and you could too probably, Everett, below the water line, and that's something to really think about when we're thinking about keeping a bridge that is in that bad a shape, because there's some stuff that we're not seeing, and it hasn't been looked at all.
I have found in my experience when, it's kind of like those home improvement projects. You get in, you just replace a piece of sheetrock, you look behind it, and oh, I gotta change the insulation. And you start working on that, it just snowballs. When you have these really old concrete projects and you start getting into a rehab, sometimes it really snowballs on you a lot more than you planned. And that would be, from an engineering point of view, that would be my biggest concern about rehabilitating that structure. Which was, I think, one of the considerations that VTrans took into is that we don't want to rehabilitate it, we need to replace it.
So, just to mention, with Act 153 and the 50% local share reduction, that includes pedestrian bridges. And so if a pedestrian bridge was constructed during construction, that the town's share would go back up to 10%. unfortunately.
Thank you for the information. I didn't know that.
Yep. So the preliminary project schedule, regardless of what alternative is chosen, this is in the funding year for construction in 2023. Right now, we are looking at a total cost estimate of about $3.5 million, and an estimated town share of $172,000. That's with the 5% share. That does not include hazardous waste remediation. Yep.
Do you have an estimate on that?
Not yet.
We don't, because we don't know the extent of the problem there.
No ballpark in the middle of the road?
Do you have a ballpark?
No, it also depends on the type of contamination and how, and the volume that you're excavating. I mean, if you're laying that back on a 1 on 1.5 slope back into the road, you can do a lot. But if you're sheet piling it off and only dealing with what you need vertically to get down to those abutments, you can reduce that amount, so.
So I can talk to
we
our
need
ha-
to- we need testing.
I can talk to our hazardous waste guy, Andy Shively, and ask him a ballpark estimate to get to you,
That'd be great.
just so you have an idea.
Would that be eligible for any EPA funding for brownfields cleanup? If the town ended up having to take care of it?
I'm not sure, but I can look into that as well.
Be another question to throw out there.
Yep.
So on that, I do another question on the numbers on that.
Yep.
So if we did build a pedestrian bridge on that, it would go back up to 10%. So it would essentially double the
Yep.
cost, which is almost very close to the new off alignment.
Correct. So which would you be most concerned about? Closure duration, bridge aesthetics, environmental impacts, recreational impacts, other, or not really concerned?
Is this regarding the construction or the eventual result?
This is the eventual, this is the construction.
Yep.
And we do have, bridge aesthetics is the final product. We do have another slide that's similar to this coming up. And which design aspect is most important to you? The shoulder width bicycle accommodations, the bridge railing, construction year, construction duration, cost, or other?
Can we say economic development? Where does that come at some point?
Is that what other people, is that what that 25% represents?
If I vote that way, that's what
Economic
it is.
development?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, for F, go for F. Go for number.
Did you find this presentation to be too technical, too simple, just about right, or not much use at all?
Yeah, the last-
Yeah. It's very nice.
And do you find the recommended scope of work satisfactory?
By that, you mean
Our
alternative
recommended,
3A?
In
yeah.
terms of the 3A? If you like 4 better, maybe say no. So we're just about at the end here. Next steps. The next step here is we're going to wait for the town to respond on how they want to proceed. I spoke to Wendy a little bit before the presentation. If you do want to proceed with alternative 4, that alternative does not have management's approval. They don't agree with constructing a new bridge and leaving 3 bridges that are in disrepair onto the island. So if that is an alternative that you do want to go forward with, that's going to be a big push for the town. You're gonna have to write a letter to our program manager, to your legislature. So
Now
that
you
would be some
mentioned
additional footwork.
3 bridges,
yeah.
there's 2 bridges.
Well,
That's right, there's the Vilas Bridge too.
Yeah, but
So-
that doesn't belong to us. so.
That's
So that
true.
can't go into our
5% of
consideration, because we have no
Yeah.
control over that.
We have no control over that.
Yeah.
We've tried to influence it, but
So there are, but that would be,
Yeah.
that would be leaving 2 structurally deficient bridges onto the island that wouldn't be addressed by the project. So we'll wait for your response. I have a couple of items that I'm gonna follow up with the town on. Cost for the hazardous waste. I'll look at turning radiuses for the Depot Street Bridge. I should have that done by the end of the week, I'd say. Once we get a response, we'll develop conceptual plans, distribute for comment. If you want another public meeting then, we could hold another public meeting. So that's the request public informational meeting. Then we process local agreements, so that's the finance and maintenance agreement. And then there'd be the right-of-way process, which will likely be needed here. And the town is responsible for any chosen detour route, so that would be the town would choose the route and sign it according to the MUTCD, which is part of the F&M agreement. And that's it. Any other questions, comments?
I'd like to ask what happens in the 5-year waiting period? How frequently do you get the bridge checked to see if it's still acceptable for vehicular traffic?
Yep, so it's on a 12-month inspection frequency. Oh, yeah, yep. And if at any point our inspectors go out there and it's determined the bridge is no longer safe, we would ask the town to close the bridge. And that would be,
So just like the Vilas Bridge. and
that would be
the
closed
buttons,
until
those parts of
construction.
it.
Roads.
Then we have one.
Gaetano, question?
So, I was thinking this before that picture, but, do we know the integrity of the canal walls? Essentially, we're gonna have to incorporate some of them into the footing integrity of a new 75-year bridge.
Yeah, so.
Has that been inspected, or are we going to, will it be new?
I think the impacts to the canal walls are gonna be minimal.
I'm not,
Um,
are they gonna be supporting any of this?
They
new
wouldn't be
bridge?
supporting, it would be supported entirely on its own. We haven't gotten borings yet.
Okay.
Um,
Well, say it deteriorates further, it wouldn't impact the integrity of this new bridge.
no,
Still be a 75-year bridge?
it would still be a
The
75-year
canal walls
bridge.
collapse.
We would design that so it stands all
Yeah,
on
yeah.
its own. We would design, you know, the wing walls or some sort of tie back into the existing canal wall, and that would have a 75-year life. But that bridge, you know, once you get past that point where you're tying back into the canal wall, you know, if that canal wall can go, the bridge is gonna be fine.
what about your footings and stuff?
Well, we don't want them tied to that canal
Right.
wall. We have its
Yeah.
own
That
support
was my
system
question.
underneath that.
Yeah.
We're not into reusing old concrete
Yeah.
when we're putting in a new structure. We don't wanna put new good stuff on top of bad stuff.
All right, any other questions? Because we're running out of time. We're running, Kelly?
So if you change that into a pedestrian bridge, what was the cost of that?
To change that to a pedestrian bridge, it's hard to say because we don't know the extent of the deterioration. That's really hard to estimate. About 700,000, 900,000.
One more quick one. What?
Peter?
Over the, that duration of the 20 years, if it lasts that long, if you do the rehab, the town would be responsible for maintaining that bridge, correct? Over the 20 years?
Yes, so that would be,
So that's
that would
another-
be taken out of the system, so it would no longer be eligible for town highway funding in the future.
Gaetano, last question?
For total replacement, the town, the 3.443 million total, that's including the utilities, both water, sewer, overhead,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
that's,
the overhead utilities is on the utility company, they pay for that.
water, sewer is in this town share portion, or?
It is, yep.
Right, because that would be eligible, be reimbursed by the federal government with federal funds in this particular case.
Yep, so that
So-
172 includes.
So you would, in closing it, you pay 5% of that total.
5% of what the actual costs were?
Yeah, the rest would be part of the project.
Okay.
10% if we added a temporary.
Okay, we are out of time. Everett, last question.
I just wanted to point out one thing, just at least for the board to know, this, the estimate they've had here is not based on a design, so these estimates will fluctuate. As they start a final design, they get the footing designs in there, if anything else, it may go up.
Yeah, it could go up, but the relative difference between the two
Right.
is we feel reasonably confident with that for decision-making purposes, but that final thing is, we may be off 20%, but if they're both off 20%.
Even though one's new and one's.
So when we look at town bridges, we try to make sure that our cost isn't gonna be a lot over from what we're showing. If anything, we'd like it to be under, because I know towns do need to budget for this, and so we don't wanna go to a town and say, hey, it's gonna cost $170,000 and have it cost $250,000. And so those costs are, I don't expect it to be much.
I can see some competition.
Yeah.
Okay, we are officially out of time and we've encroached on the next meeting. So,
Do you want to briefly do the next item?
I don't know if we have any time to go into the next item, do we? Or, well,
We could do it in 2 minutes, I think. I mean, it
Yes.
depends on how extensive the conversation is.
I have to ask trustee, I
Okay.
guess. Deb, do you mind if we steal 5 minutes of your time?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, the development office would like to submit an application for electric vehicle charging stations, and the due date is Friday. So that's why it's coming to you now. Is there any cost to us for this?
Yeah, so,
Like, super quick.
Yep, super quick. So, 90% funded, and there's over 2 years, there's a number of rolling entry points. $210,000, our share is $21,000. A third to a half would be Department of Public Works.
Do you wanna-
And
Okay, I got it.
I already passed those out.
Oh,
basically,
I have one.
okay.
3 goals for the charging stations to attract electric vehicle owners into the town to patronize our shops, restaurants, and entertainment, to provide EV charging infrastructure to help meet the state energy plan climate goals, and to maintain our infrastructure and services in the village centers as current and relevant. And you can see from the application, I'll just point out all of the characteristics that score points. They're pretty competitive. We meet all of them. Charging station at the waypoint across from the train station, points for that, intercity rail, the designated downtown here, designated downtown in Saxon's River. It provides that infrastructure in those 3 places. Yeah.
All right, you've
Question.
already talked to, sorry, Peter, to Green Mountain Power about the 3-phase power
Yes.
relocation and all of
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Peter?
Who's paying for the juice for all this? Is it on the town, or is it on the individual owner that's gonna use that?
So the recommendation is, they're all with the ChargePoint network. The $210,000 includes 5 years of assurance. Any parts, labor, anything goes wrong, they send someone out. 5 years of the networking, so cellular to charge people with charge cards. The recommendation is to do the first year where we pay for the electric charges, and to help get them known and used. And then after that, we charge and we set a fee structure that can earn funds, can be favorable.
Who monitors that to make sure that it's being followed through, because we had a problem with that down at Waypoint Center a couple of years ago, where somebody was just plugging in down there with an electric vehicle, and nobody caught up with it until they saw a huge increase in electric bill.
Right, so this has reporting, and as the resolution that's recommended authorizes Wendy as the municipal authorizing official and authorizes the development director as the grant administrator who would monitor reports on usage. There's a pretty thorough reporting mechanism. It's all tied into the cellular networks, is how they're invoiced, how the usage is monitored.
How long did we know that this deadline was coming up? I mean, this is the habit we're getting into, and we need to start avoiding it, where stuff gets to us 2 days before we gotta have it done, and the stuff is laid in front of us, and we're expected to make an intelligent decision. I'm not happy with this.
Okay,
You know?
we could wait till the next round.
I mean,
Yep.
When's the next round?
It hasn't been announced yet, but it'll likely be in the spring.
Now, I mentioned up to the, up in Rockingham there at the Park and Ride, one of the EV stations there is blocked by a truck that's been there for about maybe 2 months that I can recollect.
So those are like electrical outlets, the level 1 charging
Yeah.
stations, which require being plugged in all day. These stations, the high-speed one charges in 10 to 20 minutes. It's like using a gas pump. That's at the waypoint. The other 3 are 2-hour charges, and they're the ones in the villages that encourage people to charge for 2 hours while they shop and eat.
I know green is a nice thing, but I think it was one of the New York papers, matter of fact, this morning I was reading that I think it's General Motors is cutting back on a couple of electric cars they're not going to manufacture because the price of gas is coming down, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so if we hold off on this, do you think we'd have a less of a chance of getting one of these grants? I mean, I just don't know how many, this is all part of the VW thing, right?
Yes.
And so it's a limited amount of time that these grants are available. Do you think that if we pass on it at this point, we'll put ourselves in a disadvantage by
So,
not being
well, I think
recycled?
it's likely that you have more points for putting in all of your charging stations in one application, but they're not likely to fund them all at once. So I think we have more of a chance of all of them being funded over the
Right.
12 to 15 months or how many rollouts they have. They may look at this and decide to fund one of them now, and then in the next round, they would look at funding other ones. So it's definitely an advantage to submit it now.
All right, so we don't, I sadly have much time, but what does the board think? Anyone want to make a motion?
Well,
Authorized?
I'd be curious as to actually how many people, it's a nice thing to do, but I'd be curious as to how many people actually in town have an electric vehicle that they would come here to plug in. I know there'd probably be people that may come from out of town, but when we're looking at paying the cost for the electricity here, increased cost, I have a hard time looking at that.
I think it's something that we don't know. I mean, we are right in the spot where people coming from New York or Boston would stop to recharge.
Oh, yeah.
So until, if it's
Yeah.
here, I don't know.
I don't
what the
doubt
answer
that
to
for a
is.
second. My first responsibility is to the people that I serve that are the residents, so.
Well, it would be bringing business. We always complain that
Yeah.
people skip our exit and go straight through and get off at 6 and go to Ludlow. So this would be ideally a way to bring people into town. Plus serve people here who would possibly buy these.
Springfield's got some up there that I see. It might be nice to check with our neighboring towns to see if they have some statistics as to what they
They're not
get
the
used.
same.
Those are the lower levels.
They're the lower levels.
Springfield Park and Ride is the lower levels. I think towards North Springfield, they have one of the.
Well, there's one right where the old police station used to be also. I think there's a sign there. that
Yes,
says
I think
electric.
that's
Five
All right.
minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable making any decision. We got something right before the meeting, we're being rushed because we're into the next meeting. I haven't read it, so.
All right, so I guess the consensus is to wait.
I do apologize for that. We had it on the November 20th schedule, and Green Mountain Power we had site visits scheduled, then they got held up because of the windstorm and being out on the road, and then just they weren't able to get back to it.
All right.
So apologies
So I
for
guess
that.
Thank
we'll
you.
hold off. Before we move to adjourn, I just want to say thank you, Carrie, for all of your keeping us in line. As we tend to, we couldn't have done any of our work without you over the years. So thank you very much, and enjoy retirement. Thanks.
I'll like that.
All right, move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.